My name is Ann Straub, and I'm a member of AAUW, which is the American Association of University Women, which was founded in 1881. The name is a little bit archaic. We accept all genders into the organization, and they're working on changing the name. But anybody who's interested in equality for all human beings and promoting women's rights, women's education, you're welcome to join. There's a huge national organization, and they lobby for human rights throughout the country and do a lot of good as far as women's education goes. So we're passionate about what we do and glad you're here tonight. This is a series of talks. This is talk number 2. Talk number 1 was with Tom Hanley, the Middlebury Chief of Police, and Tom talked about social issues having to do with the police department, social and economic issues, and political as well, that impact their job. The whole name of this series is Polarization. Why is it? Why are we here? What does it look like? And we're starting local with our local police department and Heidi Lacey, our local housing issues, because polarization affects social, economic, and political. Stigmatization, people's attitudes toward homeless, toward mental illness, the economic disparity, all of these things, and culture in the U.S. is adding to the state that we're in now. So we're beginning with Tom and then Heidi tonight. And then in 2022, we have 3 people from Middlebury College. We'll be talking about science, we'll be talking about American culture, we'll be talking about politics. So they will get into the whys. Why are we here today? Right now is what does it look like? It's quite tangible. So Heidi, we're so pleased to have her here tonight. She's had a very, very busy day with lots of crises at the Charter House and short staffing like every place else in the county, correct? Or the country, for that matter. So Heidi's going to talk about homelessness, people experiencing homelessness in correlation to the inadequate housing opportunities in Addison County, not just Addison County, I would guess in the country, not just here. Observations from an emergency shelter and outreach service provider. We'll have an honest, interactive discussion. It's informal. Heidi's going to tell you some things. She wants you to ask questions, add comments. Feel free to add to it. We all learn from one another as well as from Heidi tonight. And we're going to talk about obstacles faced by this very vulnerable population in our own backyard, in our neighborhood, right here, and ways that our community can support the work of all the agencies, Charter House, but also other agencies in the county, in the town, that are working with this population. They're all involved in providing both emergency and ongoing services. So Heidi will explain the many challenges and the joys and the successes that have happened at Charter House, and expand upon this part of the problem as part of the Middlebury Police Department as well, from Tom Hanley. So a little before I tell you more about Heidi personally, she has an interesting background. I'll let you know a little bit about AAUW. As I said, it's a nonprofit organization. It was founded in 1881. It's been around a long time. And as I mentioned earlier, its mission is to advance gender equity for women and girls and transgender students. More and more equity issues are being addressed through research, education, and advocacy. Our chapter in Middlebury was founded in 1922, and we meet once a month. We raise money for women's education, and we do have raffle tickets. Oh my goodness, what an opportunity you have tonight. You can get 6 tickets for $10 or $2 each. We haven't raised the prices in ages. And you can jump on Christmas shopping because they're for gift certificates at Agway, Vermont Bookshop, Weber again, a lot of local businesses, as well as some beautiful items that people have made. So if you feel so compelled, we'd love to have you buy a raffle ticket. You can just fill out the ticket over here.
Were you in sales at some point? Were you in sales?
Yes, you know what I sold? You're going to laugh when I tell you what I sold. My father had a tombstones. Give me and I sold pre-need jobs, benches, flush markers, beautiful large tombstones. You name it, I sold it. Yeah, get that tombstone now. Don't have to worry about it later. Get it right out of your family. All right. Anyway.
She didn't didn't pay me either, I promise.
So, a little bit about Heidi. As I said, Heidi is executive director of the Charter House here in Middlebury, Charter House Coalition. And she's been in Addison County since 2006. She's had all kinds of jobs dealing with people. She was a manager at Fire and Ice. She was vice president of sales at Connor Homes. She worked in public safety at Middlebury College, where she's sure she got an eyeful there. And also, she's a Middlebury College police dispatcher. I mean, a Middlebury Police Department's dispatcher right now. So she's doing 2 jobs. I don't know how she's doing it, but she is. And interestingly enough, when Heidi was 13, her goal in life was to start a rehab house to help people. So here we are, all these years later. Pretty cool. She did not graduate from high school the normal way. She received a GED and went to college. And she dealt with issues that she sees in her clients now throughout her life with friends and family. So she's, lived lots of things. And that's why she's so good at what she does. So welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. So, first of all, I do want to sincerely thank each of you for allowing me this opportunity. Typically, I sit in an office at the top of the green and not always out and about in the public. And you mentioned the word stigma, and it's something that I bring up often with our house guests. And we talk about the black curtain and the removal of such. So it's very nice to share this space, and thank you. I appreciate you coming out. Anyone who knows me, and there are several of you here that do, know that when Mary invited me in, I was like, ooh, I get to come in and talk about something I'm extremely passionate about, and how am I going to dazzle everyone with this beautiful PowerPoint presentation and give you statistics, and life happens. And the population that I work with and rub elbows with every day is extremely unpredictable. And at about 6 o'clock tonight, I was like, you know what? Here are my cards, and this is what I'm going to do. So we are here to talk about very important concerns for our community, for our nation. And that includes affordable housing. It includes homelessness. It includes how do we work through barriers, how do we work through real challenges to help people find shelter above them every night. So, affordable housing is where I will start. We all know we need it. That is no conversation, there's no secret to that conversation in this town. We talk about it at the select board meeting, we talk it in the various groups that most of you are probably members of. There's not enough rental units. There's very few willing landlords. Property management is scary in these times. They just went through 18 plus months of maybe not getting paid rent. So their families' lives are put in jeopardy, and they're feeling the pressures of mortgage payments. Can you hear me okay? No. I'm gonna try, am I turning this up? Yes? Okay. Good to give me cues because I speak softly. So the challenges around affordable housing aren't just about real estate. We are a state right now that is seeing a tremendous amount of funding from the federal government to help answer this question of homelessness and affordable units, affordability. We don't know what to do with it, quite frankly. As agencies, we're extremely excited to have the opportunity, but then we realize we're a small state and we need to catch up. If a friend of mine, Elise, was here from Addison County Community Trust, I think she would say, we need to really review zoning. We really need to talk to our legislative groups to say, what does it look like to be in a rural state primarily and still be able to help families of 1 and 2 afford a space to live? So those are questions we all ask on a regular basis. The other pieces around affordable housing is, what does it look like? What does it look like to you? Does it look like a sky rise, like you drive through Boston and you see those big buildings, and that's not what we want in Vermont. No way. Does it look like duplexes? There's a few of those around Middlebury. There are not a lot of multi-unit homes, so there's not anything that we start to do requires a lot of bricks and mortar, which requires funding, which requires builders that are booked out through next year. So many challenges right now in just identifying spaces, getting through zoning, and opening up affordable homes. Saying nothing about the housing market. I'm not sure how you all are feeling about that, but nothing is affordable if you are a longtime resident in Addison County that isn't making really a livable wage, and that happens quite often. So I was going to talk about available units, and I reached out to Addison County Community Trust and the John Graham Shelter, who also does quite a bit with property management, not just as a homeless shelter, but they are really moving into transitional housing and more long-term stable housing. And both Susan and Elise provided me with some information, and it's interesting to me that what we know as agencies is that the people we're serving typically look and need 1 to 2 bedroom units. That is very difficult to find. I look through Craigslist and Front Porch Forum and can't really find anything for less than $1,200 a month. My mortgage, tax, and insurance is $780, right? I've had my house for years though. I could not actually afford to go out and pay rent, and I have a full-time job and a part-time job. So $1,300 a month, mostly nothing included. So right off the bat, we take the majority of would-be renters right out of this option. That's pretty telling. 13-bedroom homes, if we, or sorry, not 13-bedroom homes, 3-bedroom homes, that would be quite amazing. I would turn that into a shelter, actually. Sorry. Apologies. We need that, if you know of anybody. 3-bedroom houses, so if you have a family, maybe it's 1 parent, 2 children, not the same sex, they need a 3-bedroom home. Find that for less than $1,500 in Addison County. It's just not possible, it doesn't exist. People are concerned about their neighbors. So when we think about affordable housing, we think, what's a challenge that comes with affordable housing? I don't want neighbors that smoke, I don't want neighbors with whiny kids, I don't want neighbors that might be unemployed or underemployed. I've got some stigma. I've got some judgment going on there, so I'm not going to open up this 2-bedroom duplex or whatever this unit might be. I'm going to turn them down right away because they're going to make me uncomfortable in my own living space. And that's something that we all have to ask property owners. What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid to rent to someone that would be considered living in affordable housing? Because there's good answers. Everybody has a right to what they fear. But the fact is that there's so many things happening among service providers right now that I think if more people would ask, they would be pleasantly surprised to know that services follow families. Services follow individuals into long-term sustainable housing. So I hope, go ahead.
What are service providers?
Service providers in Addison County look like case managers. They look like qualified social workers, maybe not qualified, but willing to participate. So a case manager in most agencies has the resources and experience in helping people obtain documentation, work through getting a primary care physician, filling out housing applications, going to view apartments, talking with the landlord. Once they've leased up, that relationship does not have to end. So really what we learned as providers through the pandemic was that numerous families and households came forward. They identified themselves as people in need, and connections were made. And then the state decided, very wisely, to say, okay, we need to make funding available when this state of emergency ends to follow families. And it's very soon, right? We're not even 9 months away from that ending point. Oh, I don't know that it's ended. So the outcomes are not, I can't give you statistics for that. But what I will say is that by following families into long-term housing and staying connected, maybe it's once a week with one family, maybe it's once a month for another family, but you end up having that option be sustainable. So you're breaking fewer leases, you're seeing less people come back into the homeless system, and that's powerful. It's something to really hang on to. I say I'm a lot. Does that answer the question of service provider?
That's helpful, thanks.
Okay. It could be someone also that's maybe at CBOEO, right? So we don't always think about the agencies that aren't directly housing people. Hope, Turning Points of Addison County, these are all service providers that are working to build relationships. And in our circle, if we don't have an answer, we pick up the phone and we call the agency that does. So if I hold the relationship with someone who's staying with me at Charter House, but I don't have the bandwidth or the funding to get them a cell phone so that they can answer phone calls from a would-be employer, I might call another agency and say, hey, I know you've got that money, can you help me set this person up with technology? Okay, so a lot of that behind the scenes piece happens. So I don't want to talk about affordable housing anymore, because you all know it. So we're clear about it, we don't have enough of it. Affordable housing comes with a lot of stigma. I hate the word, I don't like living in it. So we're gonna move on to what goes on in the life of someone who is homeless. And we're gonna take a very deep, raw look at what it means. And Ann wasn't kidding. It was a really rough week at Charter House. So I'm going to do my best up here tonight on a few hours of sleep, and hopefully you leave here with a perspective that gives you space to look the next homeless person in the eye that you see. Say, hey, I'm Ann, or hey, I'm Heidi. How are you doing today? So homelessness looks like what? Anybody throw anything out there, please. What does homelessness look like to you?
People living on the street.
People on the streets, yes.
Fear and insecurity.
Insecurity.
No safe place to keep their belongings or to move forward. There's constant fear.
Constant fear, they're constantly in transition, they're constantly carrying everything that they own in bags, right? Is anybody familiar with the foster care system, how sad it is when a child comes into your home, and what are they carrying but a good old hefty black garbage bag? And it's heartbreaking, because to them that's their suitcase, that's their life. Well, when we see someone who's homeless here, right in town, right? They're probably carrying similar bags. Sad, it's scary. What if you see someone here in town that you assume is homeless and is also experiencing mental illness? What does that look like to any of you? And there's zero judgment from where I stand. What does it look like to you?
They're talking to themselves.
They're talking to themselves. Are they yelling at you?
They're yelling.
Yeah. Are they yelling at something over here that you don't see? Right. They see it. We don't know what it is, but they definitely see it.
Disheveled looking. Just
Yeah.
all
They're all,
over.
what's going on? Right? What's wrong with that person that doesn't get up and take a shower in the morning? I don't shower every day, I'll tell you that. My staff can tell you that. It's frightening. It's frightening from the perspective of people who live in houses, who have walls around them and roofs above them. It's frightening to see someone who doesn't. And I want to share something with you. People that are homeless have lived every single day of their life maybe not in okay circumstances. They get up every single day and they do it again, right? So we all have had moments in our life that have really pushed us. Think of your worst day you've ever had, and it gets a little morbid, I'm sorry. But then imagine yourself walking into a building with complete strangers, and here I am. I'm like, hi, how you doing tonight? What's your name? Can I have your date of birth? You've been vaccinated? We get through that. You got a social security number? What brings you in tonight? You've just had the worst day of your life, and all you want to do is lay down and forget about it. Or maybe you don't want to lay down. Maybe you want to go get your next drink. Or whatever it is that you use to soothe yourself. And here I am, right here with you, and I'm drilling you and trying to get all sorts of information out of you. Also, I can help you. That's how it starts. In a homeless shelter, people come in and we need to get to know them. And by the way, for the record, that's not how we operate. It's very different than that. It typically looks like, come in, have you eaten? How are you feeling? Let's talk tomorrow. Let's get you into a class space. Because at Charter House, it's about compassion, and it's about recognizing that whatever that person went through to bring them into a homeless shelter deserves time and space. So let's get through the next night. Maybe it's a day. Maybe it's the next day we start in. And this is where we start to really identify, why is this person homeless? So there's the obvious. Economic hardships. People lose jobs. Rents are high. Landlords don't want to wait for rent. There's a legal process that helps someone to evict you. There's broken home structures. There's divorce. One parent has to go. There's no family around. Person might be unemployed. That person may have no means. That person's homeless and may show up at Charter. Maybe they're just underemployed. Maybe they are working 40 hours a week at $13 an hour. They've got a car. They're doing okay. They shower every day even, right? They do laundry. They look like you and I. Better than me some days. But they might be homeless. They might be sleeping in their car, and then it gets cold. Or the starter goes on their car. They're homeless. Those are all forgivable things. I don't think anybody here would look down upon that at all. Divorce happens, people lose their jobs, no stigma. And then there's the harder things. There's domestic violence that leads to homelessness. And that doesn't affect just one person, that affects children, it affects both parties involved, more if there's more people involved in the actual violence, but it affects our community greatly. The schools, the hospitals, the first responders. I'm sure Tom spoke about this. Domestic violence causes homelessness. And it causes repetitive homelessness, because as we all know, people go back. Maybe 7 or 8 times before they decide that they're not going back. Disabled, differently abled, physically unable to maintain your house. I have someone in my care who has a house. He's worked all of his life. He can't be there because he has these episodes where he forgets things. He doesn't have enough to go into a critical care unit because he doesn't quite qualify. He has no place to go. He has no family living. He's at the age of retirement, and he can't live alone. He can't drive anymore. He's got a truck. I wouldn't say that he's not capable. but he has no place to go. Disabled, differently abled persons have a really hard time finding affordable housing. Handicap units almost don't exist. Charter House didn't have a handicap accessible bathroom until, I think, last year. So we gotta come up with the times, right? Not just as agencies, but as landlords and property managers. There's ongoing medical needs that cause people to be homeless. And that can look anything like HIV. I don't know how often you research it, but that's at least $4,000 a month in medications to keep someone healthy and alive. Think about that. I'm whining about my $780 mortgage payment, right? Other people have chronic conditions that insurance does not cover completely. They're likely homeless. Neglect by family happens, but it causes homelessness. Probably 8 of the people that I've come into contact with over the course of the summer, all probably under the age of 24, have been asked to leave by their family. That's pretty devastating. Takes away a lot of someone's confidence. They probably don't have the skills to even fill out a housing application, let alone go meet with a landlord and come across like someone who's capable of taking care of an apartment. There's cast asides. Some people would say, oh, they like being homeless. Look at them, they're out there hanging out in the park, they're drinking their natty daddies, and they're having a good time. They choose to be living in that lifestyle. Maybe, but what got them there? So we can't just assume that someone chooses that lifestyle. They're cast aside though. Very few people look them in the eye. People tend to step aside when they see them on the street. I see it often. Then there's criminal history. Housing applications require a criminal history check. So, got someone that 15 years ago committed a crime. Guess what? He is not getting housed. He is one of the greatest people that I know. Not kidding. But he is not getting housed with any type of a voucher, with any type of assistance. He is disabled, with diabetes, losing limbs, on Social Security, could afford an affordably housed, priced apartment. He's not getting in. And he knows it. He's very discouraged. He's been at this for a long time. So criminal history matters. We often tell everybody that we work with, just be honest. Just be honest on your application, because if it comes up and you weren't honest, you've totally blown your opportunity. But if you're honest, we have a chance, and we're gonna stand through it with you, we're gonna have conversations about it, and we're gonna try and get you in anyways. But that's a big one. You do something 20 years ago, and you're in this market today, you're gonna be looked over all the time. And I don't care what discrimination guidelines there are. And then we get into what we're seeing more and more and more of here in Middlebury, and that is the substance use disorders. Substance use disorders cause homelessness. Absolutely. Mental illness, minor, severe mental illness causes homelessness. And then there's human trafficking. Human trafficking is here. It's here in Middlebury. It's here in Vermont. It's in New York. It's in our neighbors in New Hampshire. It's here. We see it. So I say to you all, think about those things for a minute. You see someone on the street, they're talking to themselves, having a conversation with themselves. Ask yourself, what are they going through? What led them to that sidewalk or that park bench? Really, what led them there? And then you can start to say, whew, if that had happened to me, and I was sitting on the park bench, what would I want from someone? And this is where the conversation starts to turn. This is what I say to my staff. I want you to treat people the way you would want your mother treated, the way that you would want your best friend from high school to be treated. Everyone who walks through the door gets treated that way. Because once someone starts to feel nurtured, then they start to grow away from these things. So substance use, I think that in this town, we've grown immensely through the pandemic around supports for substance use. We have grown immensely in the conversations around how do we overcome this lack of housing. We're bringing conversations to the right people. We're going to the legislative groups. We're talking to town select boards. We're having opportunities like this. The mental illness aspect, though, I would say remains extremely high in those list of barriers. We end up with, in a housing environment, there's such a lack of understanding around mental illness. So when you leave tonight, take with you that Heidi just asked one thing of me, and it was to look up something about mental illness. Anything. Google it. What is mental illness? Get a definition. Because at the end of the day, all of the barriers that I listed affect our mental health. Every single one of them, whether it's our self-esteem, whether it's physically, it's all of those barriers affect how we are mentally able to stay in four walls, pay our bills, cook for our families, shower every day, go to the grocery store. How are we able to function? So learn something new about mental illness. Some of the things that we see at the shelter that you don't recognize. I have people at the shelter who have masters. 2 people. They have master's degrees. They are homeless in my shelter. I didn't get a high school diploma. And how cool is that? That I get to sit down every day and have lunch with someone with a master's. We talk about wonderful things. We also see people that have given years and years of their life as first responders. They have been taking care of you and your families. Now they're homeless. But they are so proud, so proud. We have individuals amongst us that have agreed to training programs. So they've left neglectful situations. They are encouraged by their case managers and their house peers, and they're signing up to make change. You know what else they're doing? They're learning life skills. So at my last house meeting, I took a poll. And it was just a simple raise your hand. How many people in the room were ever taught to scrub the toilet? And a few hands kind of did this, and a few lips went like that. And then it was, how many of you were taught to make a bed or boil water, right? And we start to learn that also at the heart of homelessness is a lack of life skills. So when we're thinking about polarization and what happens amongst our society, I think it's time to go way back to the basics and start asking people, what is it that I can help you do? What is it that I can help you learn to better your life? Not because I think you need to live in a house. Maybe you want to live in a yurt. Maybe you want to find yourself a job, save some money. One woman's goal is to get an RV so that she can travel out west. I am all for it. Because who am I to say as a housing person that she needs to live in a house? She doesn't. Right? So it can look very different. And it's about giving people choice and an opportunity to say, yep, these are my really serious problems and I know you're going to judge me, but this is what I need from you. And it's meeting them at the table and saying, okay, how do we do this? How do we start checking things off the boxes? to get you from homelessness into an environment that feels safe for you, feels good for you, and gives you a long-term opportunity to heal from all that other stuff. And I think, because very honestly, I was so unprepared for tonight, I'm gonna stop there. So you now know that what you came in knowing is housing, it's a crisis, it's everywhere. You also have a glimpse at what it is that walks through Charter House door when somebody identifies themselves as homeless. I get very in the weeds when it comes to individual cases, and I won't do that to you all. But I do want to answer questions. You came here this evening to learn more about this, and I'm only doing you credit if you ask, and I can answer and shed some light on things. So, the floor is also yours now. Yes?
So this is kind of backpedaling a bit, but you mentioned human trafficking in Vermont. I know that happens a lot in like in agricultural working fields. Is that where it is a lot in Vermont, or do you see it in different like ways?
So the question is human trafficking. It's thought to be typically within agricultural settings. And the question is, are we seeing that outside of that environment? And the answer is yes. I think one of the pieces that comes up for some folks in town in Addison County is that we should help our own first. And I strongly disagree with that. Some of the individuals that I have come across that are fleeing trafficking are not from Addison County. But I cannot imagine turning them away because of that. So it does happen in that environment, but that is not the only environment. Vermont is recognized as a state that's moving forward in terms of safety. So I suspect that will feel like a double-edged sword for some time, because we may not quite be ready for those that seek our services there as quickly as we need to be. But does that answer that? Okay. What else? Yes, Leanne.
It's just a lead off from that is that I live my life, most of it in this town, and the thought of people sleeping on the street is overwhelming. And I think we've also known for a long time that we've had a place where agencies work together, we're responsive, and as a result, attracting people coming in. So I sit on one side and I say, we can't even manage what we have, but we can't turn away. It just compounds so much.
So once a week, so the question here, and just the real, thank you very much for just being so open about it. On the one hand, we think about helping our own. And we see folks in the community who are experiencing homelessness, and then we see people at the bus stop. And we know in our hearts and our heads that they're not from Addison County, and here they come. And what Leanne is saying is that she's heard that Addison County is very welcoming. Mm-hmm. She's not wrong. We are really good at what we do as agencies. And I mean that. So you have to decide. You can't be on both sides of it. It's one or the other. And what I mean by that is we're either open or we're not. And in the state of Vermont, we tend to say, yep, we're open. And that's what I see that happens in Addison County. And yes, it's taxing on our resources. It is very taxing. And we have very real conversations about what does that look like throughout the state. But here's what you may not see. When our 4 hotels are full or overbooked, guess what? Homelessness still happens, and myself and another shelter have to find care for people in another county. And I don't want those people sleeping out. So For me personally, we stay open. And it's important to have that conversation, you know? And I think what area agencies would say, continue to stay educated about that. Continue to ask for numbers. How many people are we serving from out of county versus those that are in county? And you'll be happy to know that it's not it's not this huge number, right? But it goes both ways. Yes, Jennifer.
I met a man who has been sleeping in a rec park, and he said he had a case manager, and I was wondering, like, is there no room for him, or did he, you know, like, I don't know if there's anyone still sleeping out there, but there were a few people, and it sounds like they're connected, but I'm just wondering, like, is there space for them?
I can answer that.
Okay.
So the question is, I met a man who's been sleeping in the park. Talked to him, good for you, thank you. He's got a case manager. So why is he in the park, Heidi? Good question. Okay, so there's the first one, maybe he likes the park. Hasn't gotten cold enough yet. He's not ready to come inside. Okay, it is not breaking the law.
That is what he said. I was just wondering
Yeah.
if that was like really.
Oh, it happens, let me tell you. I can invite them in all day long and encourage them to eat Jane's cooking, and no. So it's not cold enough yet. Maybe, and this is an assumption, he doesn't like to be around people. I have those days. Congregate living is really hard. So I'm gonna wait and I'm gonna stay out at that park in my solitude until I absolutely can't. Are we full? Yes. Agencies are full. So the park's a pretty safe place, because it's safer than in the woods someplace, where others may be. It's very common at this point, and especially after the pandemic. Think of the relationships that I mentioned earlier. So we had at one point throughout the 4 motels, I believe, 130 households that agencies were serving through the pandemic. So these were folks that were literally homeless otherwise. And they used a very important system to keep them housed and safe and to keep our community safe of spread of COVID, correct? So those relationships began. Every one of them had a case manager. You had to have a case manager, in fact, in order for economic services to continue to house you. You had to engage. You had to fill out applications. You had to be doing all sorts of things to better your lives. So, yes, that person does have a case manager. And likely the case manager meets with them either at John Graham Shelter or at the library or maybe CBOEO or HOPE. And they're talking about housing. He's likely on waiting lists because he knows that cold weather's coming, right? He knows that the spaces he typically goes to are full.
And that leads to another question, which is, like, I saw in Front Porch Forum, somebody asking for, you know, building supplies, because he's trying to make a shelter, which, you know, that's enterprising, and I'm just really worried about the people that are.
What are you worried?
I'm
Really
worried
say.
about them sleeping outside.
Right. So Jennifer's saying that someone posted on Front Porch Forum, they are innovative, right? They're at this library probably using those free computers and they are getting themselves a Front Porch Forum account. Guess what they're doing? They're surviving. They're so, so good at this. And so, yeah, I don't want
I guess
anybody
the other
to
thing I'm worried about is people tearing down his shelter, or somehow
Right.
not letting him do that.
be in that space.
Where?
And it's a conversation that has to be had amongst property owners, business owners, taxpayers, town officials, first responders. Everyone needs to be involved in that conversation. Because if my shelter's full and 4 area hotels have had enough, then what are the choices? We're gonna find people in the ATM lobby booths. We're going to find people at the bus stop wrapped in blankets. We're going to potentially have people looking for building materials to go try and build something, what, maybe along the TAM? And what's gonna happen? Department of Public Works is going to get complaints. Middlebury Police Department's going to get complaints. Because as citizens, we're afraid. We might not look at it like, hey, that person's just being really innovative and surviving, right? Now he's intruding on my stuff. And there will have to be decisions that will be made. And right now, the way that it sits is that typically we, as I'll speak a little bit out of tongue here, Tom will have to hopefully forgive me, but we really try and work with folks that do that. And we try and acknowledge that they're there, they've built the space to stay protected. What can we do to help? As service providers, we're quick to say, we've got tents, we will purchase items for you, but that's not really the answer. It's a Band-Aid. People should leave here knowing what the resources are. So if you see someone in that situation, it is okay to have the conversation. Hey, what do you need? Do you need a meal? Charter's got that, 11:15 to 11:45. Stop by. You're gonna see Jane and Peanut. You know, do you need clothing? Right? What, do you need a phone? It's okay to ask. And they may swear at you and tell you to go away. Expect it. And then just be like, okay, I tried, and go away.
Yeah.
No harm done.
I think it is the stigma that I'm more afraid of than the people sleeping outside. I think people should be able to sleep outside as safely as possible.
Yeah.
So it's the stigma that I'm afraid about.
It is stigma. And you know what? It is this society that it's just allowed it, right? So I had a very, what time do we end? I'm sorry.
8 o'clock and it's 7:45.
Okay.
But we can go beyond if people have more questions.
Okay, I just want to share, so at Charter House, we have at least a monthly house meeting. And one of the conversations that we have at Charter House is around substance use and stigma. And we are considered a low barrier shelter, meaning that you come as you are. Okay, if you have a house pet, I have to accommodate that. Although I'm not a cat because I have plenty of people with allergies. If you have a substance use disorder and you are maintaining, I have to support that. If you're an active alcoholic, I have to support that, okay? So in years past, Charter House was closed in the summer months. And I don't know if any of you have noticed, but Charter House has stayed open. We are open 24 hours a day now. So people who are experiencing homelessness and using substances and possibly are mentally ill are not forced to go to the library. They're not forced to go out to the public parks. They're allowed to stay in their home. And it's made a remarkable difference. They get more time with their peers. They're having lunch at the table with their housemates. But I asked them. I got a little angry at a recent house meeting. I do that. I get a little emotional. And we'd had a lot of drinking the previous week. I mean, a lot of it. It was like, I don't know, I felt like college students had moved in and we were bombarded with all of these circumstances that all revolved around drinking. And staff was stressed and housemates were stressed and volunteers were feeling it. So we all got together and said, hey, what's going on? Why this increase? What's happening and what do you need right now? And then I got bold and said, I want to remind you of something. You stay in these four walls because we're allowing it, like it's never been allowed before. And you all share with me how judged you feel when you go out into the Middlebury community. So let's tighten this up a little bit. Maybe drink a little less. And it worked. Because it matters to them. They feel the stigma when they walk off the charter driveway and down the sidewalk. They feel it. I had a great conversation with Renee, who works here at the library. She's going to start coming in Wednesdays. And she came in and met with my colleague Ben and I, and we talked about the power of looking someone in the eye, right? So I want you to look up something about mental illness, and then I want you to check yourself every time you see someone and recognize if you look them in the eye. And could you do it to the guy who's sitting on the park bench? And chances are that society has taught you, you don't have to do that. So I'm encouraging you to try it. Because you probably make a good friend. You will likely walk away with a strong understanding. When you look into the eyes of someone who's been homeless, there are so many stories. So you give yourself an opportunity to learn about that person. Okay, other questions we got?
Can I
Yes.
just reinforce that? I
Yes.
happened to do that last week. Somebody was, I was at the stoplight and there he was. And I had a candy and I had a protein bar or something. And I said, would you use this? And he looked me right in the eye and he had the most beautiful smile in the world. And that kept me going for a long time.
And you're sharing that tonight. And that to me is like, you know what? There's no fear in it. On my worst day, do you think I looked approachable at all? No. Ben's probably seen that. He works with me. No. People don't look approachable on their worst day, but they are. They're human. In the back.
Can you share with us perhaps some hope, like what kind of conversations, you mentioned there was a lot of conversations going on in between elected officials and different levels of government and the organizations about what kind of relief might be coming? And the second part is, has anyone ever looked at like empty space like the Connor Home facility to be able to set up individual shelter, individual like housing units underneath the one roof with common bathrooms and things of that nature,
So yes. So the first part, is there hope? Every single day. I stand before you exhausted, and I can tell you I'm gonna get up in the morning and I'm gonna go do it again. Because I work with 7.5 people and a handful of volunteers and 2 dogs, and we serve no fewer than 22 people 24 hours around the clock. I'm gonna do it every day. Because it matters. There's always hope, right? So that's just generic.
but hope for housing.
I know, I'm getting there. But yes, there is hope for housing. So I mentioned earlier that the state is now seeing more funding than we've ever seen. And I think there was stumbling. There was stumbling around what do we do with it. It's coming faster than we know how to spend it, was part of what we saw during COVID, during the whole relief funds. But you're in a state of panic at that point, so you're literally just putting it to the closest thing. And for homeless population, it was the motel voucher system. So then move forward. So I'm gonna throw some acronyms out to you, and feel free to always call me out on it, I'll do my best. But some of the state-funded programs, which are also backed by federal funding, include the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, so VRAP. That particular program is really designed to keep those people who are facing eviction in their homes, because we do not want to see people moving out. That program is, I would say, on fire. There's a lot of quirks in it, but agencies are sticking with it.
Good
So-
fire or bad fire?
It's good fire. So I don't know the latest dollar figure, but we are talking 272,000 or something. It was ridiculous, the amount of funding that has already been paid. So this is anyone who is at risk of being evicted gets help with arrears. Landlords can get involved for direct payment. They have up to 12 months of funding for rental. So if they're 3 months behind, they can get themselves current. They could use another 9 months to help stabilize themselves. So that's the VRAP. And it's a good program. It really is impacting directly and quickly. well, 45 days. That's quick though. And then there is a rapid rehousing initiative. And this was an initiative that took flight in, I believe, mid-June of 2020. And that particular fund, federally funded and then state funded, really says to people, can we move you in? What do you need to move in? You've been working for months with your case manager. There's finally a unit available that you qualify for. You've done all the hard work. Let's help you with your security deposit. Let's clear that Green Mountain bill that you had from 3 years ago when you lost your job. Let's help you get stabilized. Can we get you a 1 month's rent, 2 months rent? So those are the two that really pop into mind, okay? Relief is there, and it will continue to come. There's ARPA funding, and Charter House, I simply do not have the bandwidth to take part in it, but I know ARPA funding is helping to really create homes. ZEM units and apartment buildings. The trouble is that when you start to think about empty spaces in relation to these funds coming in, there's a lot of restrictions around them. So it's not as simple as saying, hey, here's 17,000 square feet of building that we could potentially house people in. You've got to go through all sorts of bricks and mortar and rehabilitating. And you may only have a certain amount of time to spend that money. So what we found as agencies was the excitement was there. Oh, look at Connor Homes. We've talked about it numerous times. But there's a lot that goes with it. And with the builders and contractors as busy as they are, they're not going to stop what they're doing for their neighbor to take on this project, I promise you. And we only have until 2022 to spend the money, right? So there were a lot of stipulations at the legislative level that make it sound good, but in reality and on the ground, it's not as helpful as one might think. And I just wanted Susan, can I put you on the spot about ARPA? Mm-hmm. Susan is here, she's the executive director from John Graham Shelter. And she is taking part in the ARPA funding. So do you have anything to add about the hope around that?
ARPA is the American Relief Program Act, I think.
That's close enough.
And so a component of it is for capital, it's for housing. And so there is an awful lot of money coming into Vermont where people can use ARPA funding to build new units, add on. We're looking at increasing the number of units we have in our rental properties, as well as purchasing and rehabilitating other units and preserving the units that we have. So those dollars can be used for lots of things related to shelter. The biggest problem is that it's the zoning issue. Many of the properties we see where you could put in a number of units, the zoning in the area does not allow for multifamily housing or, congregate living. And then the second thing, and so there's a legislative process. It takes time before you can get that approved, before you want to purchase the property, because what if you purchase the property and then you can't use it for what you wanted to? And but the other problem is really with the supply chain. Contractors are taking jobs with higher income customers who can pay them right away, that they don't have to wait for the funding to come through, and they're taking care of higher level properties, and they're full. They just don't have time. So most construction projects that are underway, it's a 2-year time frame. And so when we look at this immediate problem, like winter's coming in Vermont, what do we do about housing? But the ARPA money is massive. There's a massive amount, and my hope is that it will be extended so that we can move through longer term projects over time and be able to make them
Take advantage of it.
take advantage of the dollars and not lose the dollars.
It was really eye-opening for us as providers. We made the assumption that this was our win. And it ended up because of the time constraints, and as Susan said, builders are very busy. It is lucrative to be doing what they're doing. And when you have government stipulations, why wouldn't you take the easy, right?
Yeah.
So it does require a lot of conversation at the zoning level, you know, legislative level. As agencies, we spoke to our local legislators back in the spring when we were very concerned about the 100 families. And I think that was helpful, you know, to just really embark on what do the guidelines really mean for us as housing providers. Does that help you, Ryan? Do you want me to elaborate?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, Mary.
Heidi, on that note, I know contractors are having a very difficult time getting skilled workers, skilled craftspeople. Is there any discussion with Hannaford Career Center to beef up their part of getting skilled, and people in there skilled and trained to do some of these projects? The cost of sending somebody to the Career Development Center from the high school is extremely high.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if some of this money could not be put toward that so that we can start training people.
So I think the initiative at this time, so just on a call that I was on today, and I know it's VCRIP, but VCRIP is a funding opportunity that allows for a concentration on youths between the age of 18 and 24. And what I learned just today, so very new, is that there is money available to assist someone within that age group that is currently housed if they would like to seek training. So what I heard also on that call when that was announced was the Hannaford Career Center, that was brought up. So I think what we'll see is some agencies we're going to catch wind of it, we'll be talking about it on our weekly meetings, and then that will allow us to really see what that looks like. You know, to that point though, the one thing I would say is we should open it up to those that are 25 and older. Because,
whatever.
right, because I think that we miss the point, someone who's homeless, it's not because they're lazy, I'll tell you that. And they would love the opportunities to get involved. Some of them are very skilled already, they just need opportunities. So I think, yes, I think that's a to be continued conversation, but I do know VCRIP has opened up some funding specific to that. Others? Yes.
Are you having enough staffing, though, to help you?
So recruiting in Addison County is a nightmare.
They can't afford to live here.
They can't afford to live here, they don't have childcare. Yeah, I don't think that there's an agency right now that can tell you that they're fully staffed. And I can speak very personally about this. When I say that we're open 24 hours a day, we are. And I have 4 case managers and a part-time cook. I have a volunteer running my entire food program. And I have then 3 other staff members that, in my mind, are in charge of just keeping harmony. So we are understaffed. And when you think about fatigue and secondary trauma and how the world in general is feeling after 18 plus months of isolation, we're feeling that right there with you. And then some, I think, I dare say. So staffing is a concern. We do talk amongst ourselves in terms of recruiting. There's several agencies that are really leaning in with one another to start sharing resources. But it is, I wouldn't say crisis level right now, but it's going to be an interesting winter. Yes.
Are you like accepting like volunteers and what does that look like?
Are we accepting volunteers? Funny you should ask. I wasn't gonna use
She
this
was
as a-
paid.
She was paid. I'll see you after the show. So we are open to volunteers. And what does it look like? I'm a very different kind of leader. So volunteers, the most meaningful to me aren't someone who actually comes in and makes sandwiches, because I have a woman named Jane who does a great job doing that. I'm looking for people to come in and sit down and have lunch. I'm looking for individuals to step into the building and hang out and do a puzzle and teach someone how to make banana bread or talk about their masters. I don't need Volunteers to come in and clean. Sometimes I do. And you may be that person, but more so what I need is people to willingly come in and sit down, pull up a chair, wear their mask, and hang out. Because stigma doesn't go away unless we're all hanging out. It just doesn't happen. And if you really want some things to do, I can find them. If that's uncomfortable, we absolutely can find them. But more so volunteers, yes, info at Charterhouse, no, info at chc.org. But yes, just reach out. We welcomed back the rugby team. They're doing brunch. Rugby is doing a dinner Saturday. And then, no, Jane, I've got it all messed up. We have college students coming in and they are cooking for guests. We do a Saturday brunch and we do a Sunday evening meal with the Middlebury Charter Club. So we have been able to bring that community back, which feels really good. So, yes, Laura.
So I just appreciate the way you framed everything and invite us so consistently to just be kind and good listeners. And that's one of the most important things we can be. And that will help de-escalate a lot of trauma if we can just do that. And I know that that's what's occurred to me over and over again, like how could I be helpful that way? Like be able to be ready to provide kindness and an answer. And that was the spirit in which we convened a homelessness task force that many of us in this room participated in. And what we want to work on is a welcome center, like a drop-in center that people can come to, that would have a public restroom, that would be open for extended hours. And one thing we did before that was just look at, well, what's available right now if you gotta go, or you want to get a meal or housing, and we created a resource card. It's a pink card, which you might be beginning to see around town.
She's paid too.
Which informs us as community members so that we have the answers, so if we encounter somebody, we can offer that. So I just wanted to let you know about that project, and that it was very informing for us, to just go through and see, oh my God, look at what we're doing, and that's what that shows in a snapshot. So you can take a copy of that, or you'll see it in the community, and that's what it's about.
That was a paid advertisement.
Thank you.
Laura has
Thank you.
worked tirelessly on this, and it really
We
is
did.
to answer.
Yeah.
A group of people did. But it really, this just simple piece of paper it literally will be referenced. It can fold up so nicely, be tucked away discreetly in someone's backpack or black hefty garbage bag, and I bet they'll use it. So thank you for this.
Yeah, and looking at zoning regulation is another priority of the homelessness task force, and you can all help with that, because when it comes time to look at zoning, you want to show up for those meetings and advocate for that. So we need those letters of support.
Thank you. Yes.
About the zoning thing, is that are a lot of these zoning issues coming up in terms of building safety? Because, we saw it happen down in Florida, or is it more kind of ridiculous things, I guess, that?
I'm gonna say it's the ridiculous things. So, are they safety issues that hold up zoning, or are they just kind of more of this paper pushing? It's a lot of paper pushing. Vermont, I think we strive to be progressive in many initiatives. And I think what we have found that zoning, like mental illness, is catching up. We have to catch up in those two areas. So a good example is going to be, as Susan said, there may be a great property, there may be someone willing to sell that property to a funded agency. Guess what? You can't put a multi-unit house on that property because the zoning regulations say you can't. So then it's that process of how long will it take? So when we as agencies talk about zoning, it really gets to the what do the laws say? What are towns willing to do to lift those regulations?
Are those local solutions available, or is it all like state level?
So I believe there are there are definitely local solutions that will be presented. I know Addison County Community Trust has done a lot of work, even locally here in Middlebury with Jen. The conversations have started. And I do really encourage you, not that anybody needs any more meetings, but if you're able to follow something, that's a great discussion to take part in.
Yeah, and even just bringing it up, I mean, look, the legislators, they want your vote, and they will listen if you just bring it up. Do something about, you know, more housing needs to be available for people who need affordable housing. Even just saying that, you don't have to offer a solution. If they know it's a pressing issue for the public, it will remain a conversation.
And we can't emphasize that enough.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to know the acronyms, you don't have to know the background behind the zoning rules. I can't remember any most days.
Some of it has to do with historic preservation.
Correct.
Like we wanted to build a couple new units in a carriage house behind one of our properties. And the zoning was like, no, you can't turn a carriage house, you know, of a certain type from a certain year into housing. So it's things like that. It's just, there's a lot of different layers to it.
So imagine if that were the case with Charter House, because Charter House is 231 years old. And look at what we've done there.
But you're not in the historic district.
Not in historic districts, but I like my dental moldings. And I really care about those a lot. Keeping the chimneys too. Any other thoughts or questions that you may have? Any sharing, anything you've learned, anything I should take away with?
One thing I'll mention that in Brattleboro, there is an organization that has an apartments in home program. And that is an auxiliary apartment unit that in Vermont, you have the right, if you have a home, to create an apartment within your footprint. And that doesn't have to go to zoning. And it's one of the programs that I'm sort of trying to push. We have some money in our church, and I'm trying to get them to choose that as one of the options to support that program. But even without money, it's something that we could put programs on to tell people that they have the right to do that and encourage them. Any type of additional unit in Addison County will help, even if it's not rented as an affordable unit, because it just increases the housing unit and the pressure on on the rent.
And what I would say is when you're having those conversations, please remember what I've suggested tonight. We have learned that ongoing wraparound services help people, they help to keep people housed.
And also ongoing services for the person who's creating the apartment.
Correct.
This is a lease, this is how you do it, this is the things you negotiate, these are the people who can help you, and we're there to help. That's the kind of program that they do.
So we as providers, we offer a monthly meeting to landlords. So it's Addison County landlords, it's monthly meeting. It is not very well
Attended.
It's not very well attended, and partly is because as service providers we're strapped for time and haven't done a great job getting the word out there. But the fact is it exists, and we do regularly see a group, and they bring all sorts of things to us. And we can very confidentially just talk through what are the issues, and most times we're able to really help them resolve things or connect them. So The resources are here.
Mm.
And if you don't feel comfortable calling me, call Susan, or call Hope, or CSAC. Call, make a call, because the resources are here. Thank you all.
There's my mask, I wasn't trying to flout the rules, I left it up here. So Heidi, thank you so much, and obviously you spoke to my heart.
I can't imagine if you've had a full night's